On June 17, 1972, a group of Richard Nixon's re-election campaign operatives were caught trying to infiltrate the Democratic National Committee in Washington, D.C. Their objective was to plant listening devices at the Watergate Hotel and gather information to use against Nixon's opponents. These operations originally developed as a result of Nixon's extreme paranoia, which was exacerbated by Daniel Ellsberg leaking heavily classified military documents to the New York Times a year prior.
The information contained in the so-called Pentagon Papers.
These documents, called the Pentagon Papers, detail the United States' involvement in the Vietnam War, dating from 1945 to 1968. The documents demonstrated that previous administrations repeatedly lied to the public and to Congress in order to downplay the USA's involvement.
The people, displaced, wandered aimlessly through the district.
While Richard Nixon was not necessarily included in the papers, the United States was still very much involved in the Vietnam War, and these things combined resulted in overwhelming condemnation.
I didn't even let him finish the sentence. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And I said, first, as I told you, there would be no interviews with the New York Times under any circumstances for the in the Pentagon Papers.
Nixon desperately tried to sweep it all under the rug, but ultimately failed. Meanwhile, Congress continued to escalate the Watergate scandal.
The president himself admitted he has lost his impeachment fight in the House, that he has not always given the public the straight story on Watergate, and that he withheld from his lawyers and the House committee certain damaging information.
Congress aimed to impeach him and remove him from office, but before they could do so, in August of 1974, Nixon resigned as President of the United States.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
The immeasurable scale of government corruption and the seemingly unending tragedy of the Vietnam War left the people of the United States a bit depressed.
People close their garages and triple lock their doors, they hide under the beds. They're even afraid to turn on their television sets for fear of what they might find out in the evening news. There's nothing more to believe in.
Perhaps the greatest accomplishment of the United States, perhaps even today, is undoubtedly the moon landing. But that was in 1969, years prior. Public interest in the Apollo program was rapidly falling. People were so disinterested in the Apollo program that by Apollo 13, only 9 months later, most major networks didn't even broadcast the launch.
No, not another boring space launch! Change the channel! Change the channel!
I can't!
The public only found out about the oxygen tank explosion a day after it happened, 56 hours from the initial launch. The famous line, "Houston, we've had a problem," was never broadcasted live. It was recorded and then played to the world after the fact.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
The politics of the Watergate era inspired a new wave of conspiracy and distrust of the US government, and NASA was not immune either. While moon landing conspiracies were tossed around from time to time, it wasn't until 1976 that a book titled We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 Billion Swindle by Bill Casing released. This self-published book initially did not receive a wide audience, but ultimately led to the widespread proliferation of the conspiracy that the moon landing was faked. A man named Peter Hyams came up with a similar idea, though less far-fetched. Hyams worked as a reporter for a local CBS station and was in the studio when the moon landing was being broadcasted in 1969. Hyams' experience as a reporter gave him insight into the misinformation machine that was the news.
I had this very passionate belief brought by my parents. I am the child of parents who basically said if something was in the newspapers, it was true. The fact that it was in the papers made it true. We came to learn that newspapers and William Randolph Hearsts and all these people lied. I am of the generation where if we saw something on television, it was true.
During the moon landing broadcast, CBS would cut to their studio in St. Louis, which aired a simulation that filled in the gaps of NASA's broadcast. These simulations, regretfully only available today in extremely poor quality as a result of analog video decay, demonstrate what the broadcast looked like. These CBS simulations were performed on a soundstage by actors, with their actions being synchronized with the real actions performed by the actual astronauts. When the Apollo 11 astronauts deployed their own video camera, it looked not much better. The footage is black and white and heavily compressed. Peter Hyams noticed something interesting about the event. The CBS simulations were very convincing for their time, and NASA themselves only had access to a single camera with a highly compressed video signal. It's easy to create an illusion with a single viewpoint, and with the meticulously choreographed simulations filling in the gaps, well, it wouldn't be impossible to fake the moon landing. Hyams thought about the idea for a while and eventually started to turn it into a screenplay. The film would eventually be called Capricorn One and was written as a thriller. In the screenplay, a contemporary NASA is scheduled to launch a crew to land on Mars. However, things don't go as planned, and a reporter discovers that the entire thing was faked through a conspiracy. But in 1972, when Hyams pitched the idea to all the big studios, they hated it and told him to get lost. Yet, as the years passed and the Watergate scandal evolved to force Richard Nixon to resign, America's newfound distrust for the government provided Hyams with a rare opportunity where all the studios wanted his script. In 1975, Hyams partnered with Sir Lou Grade, a British entertainment mogul who founded ATC Television and ITC Entertainment. Warner Brothers was announced to be the distributor, and the movie would release 3 years later in 1978. Capricorn One begins with a pleasant sunrise over a 1/10 scale model of the Apollo rocket in gantry, which in turn meant that the model was 36 feet tall. The narration was performed by Paul Haney, the actual real guy who performed the voice announcements for Mission Control during the Gemini and Apollo programs.
The crew then had a breakfast consisting of half a grapefruit, a 10-ounce steak, 12 ounces of orange juice, 2 eggs, and toast.
The film establishes the politics of the story right away. When the congressman sits down with his wife, they only receive one commemorative pair of binoculars. There is only a limited supply, the attendant explains, not enough for everyone, and this implies NASA couldn't afford to buy more, an excellent example of subtle foreshadowing. The vice president arrives, and it's clear he's only there as a formality. The president was too busy to witness humanity's reach for Mars, and sent the vice president instead. The vice president himself is so disinterested in the launch that he's caught gawking at a woman with his binoculars.
It's that big, tall, white thing over there. Can't miss it.
Meanwhile, mere minutes away from the launch, the 3 astronauts who were supposed to be on their way to Mars are suddenly asked to leave their seats and follow some guy down the gantry. They're eventually led to a secret facility where the whole conspiracy is laid out to them. The man behind the scheme, James Kellaway, explains that after 16 years of development that the Capricorn project was almost perfect. Almost. If the astronauts actually went into space, they would all be dead in 3 weeks. NASA realized this 2 months before the scheduled launch, but they were in too deep. The president had high expectations and didn't want any more screw-ups. If there were any, what little money NASA was being given would be redistributed to other government spending, and the 16 years of development to put humanity on Mars will have been poured down the drain. NASA just couldn't let this happen. The journey to Mars needed to happen. But it was clear that the only way it could be done is if they didn't do it at all. Then the astronauts are shown the film set that they will use to fake the Mars landing. The main thing the astronauts need to do is to fake 2 broadcasts, one where they fake the landing and another where they talk to their families. In a few years, when the rocket finally returns to Earth, they will force the rocket to land in the ocean where no one will see that they were never inside in the first place. One of the astronauts asks what will happen if they don't cooperate, and Kellaway replies by implying that their families will be killed.
What if we say no?
I don't know. Don't say no.
The astronauts have no choice. They must participate. This scene also features a subtle filmmaking trick where the foreground features the American flag directly in front of Kellaway. NASA, the government, is lying directly to America. Kellaway is very honest about the conspiracy. He doesn't want to do it, but he has to for the best of everyone. Much like Nixon years prior, he felt justified in his actions to lie to the American people.
One of the more amazing aspects of the success of this film to me was that people were so willing to accept it. People actually were kind of going, yeah, this could possibly happen. Yeah, sure. So I think what moderate success I ever achieved, I believe I owe to Richard Nixon and H.R. Haldeman, because I think they so soured the American public that by the end of the decade, the end of the 70s, they were willing to believe that the government was capable of doing almost anything.
In the Japanese special edition, we're shown a cheap trick with a fishing line lifting a notepad and a pencil to create the illusion of a weightless environment. Soon after, we're shown the movie set with the command module connecting to the lunar lander. The single camera pointed in just the right position sells the story to the world. More time passes and the Mars landing is about to commence. A combination of slow-motion videography and careful placement of the camera enables the Mars set to look as believable as possible. And when the astronauts place the flag on Mars, the President of the United States praises the astronauts for their accomplishments. The actual movie camera dollies back to reveal the Mars set, the hoax that fooled the world.
Those lights in the background are arcs. A lot of young people who are watching them won't recognize them because we don't use arcs anymore. They were just physically gorgeous things. Trouble is they had to be trimmed and each one had to be manned and they gave off smoke. Except that was the light source in movies for 60 years. Until a new and different kind of light called an HMI came out that replaced them.
One of the NASA technicians notices a discrepancy between the television signal and the rocket signal, and he brings this up to his superior. The technician explains that it's almost as if the television signal is coming from somewhere closer, almost like it's coming from Earth. His superiors dismiss this as a simple fault with his equipment. Then later, when he's playing a round of pool and talking about the computer fault with his journalist friend, he disappears mid-game. This bizarre disappearance inspires the journalist to pursue it further. More time passes, and the second performance is nearing its broadcast date. The astronauts now need to speak with their families, their loved ones, and lie directly to their faces. But the main astronaut manages a subtle message to his wife. He pretended not to remember their honeymoon. Maybe it's enough for someone to notice. The final months pass, and the Mars rocket is re-entering Earth's atmosphere. But a problem occurs, a big one. The heat shield responsible for protecting the astronauts during re-entry failed, and the entire crew disintegrated in under 12 seconds. Only they didn't disintegrate at all because they were never on the rocket to begin with. The astronauts figure this out on their own and conclude that they better escape quickly before NASA actually disintegrates them too. They steal a plane, but they only have enough fuel to go a few miles, and they are forced to land in the desert. The men split up and try to cover as much ground as possible. NASA catches wind of their escape and dispatches a helicopter team to eliminate them.
I had this idea from the beginning, and it was sometimes difficult to describe to other people, and that is that I wanted the helicopters to be kind of faceless, nameless characters. And I thought the way to do that was to have them stop, make what's called a pedal turn and face each other when they're talking to each other, and then back. And then when, of course, they wouldn't be doing that, you would be using radios, and there's no reason to look at the other helicopter, except I thought it gave them a personality. They became characters.
Meanwhile, the journalist finds a few good leads and gets very close to the desert where the astronauts are located. His pursuit leads him to a crop duster pilot who agrees to take him on a trip through the desert. 2 of the astronauts get caught by the government and it's implied that they're killed. Only 1 astronaut remains, and by good fortune the journalist and crop duster spot him before the government agents get to him first. The chase is on, and a moderately impressive chase scene occurs, and through the clever release of the pesticide tank, the 3 men are able to confuse the enemy helicopters and force them to crash into a large cliff face. The would-be widow of the astronaut is chauffeured to the funeral ceremony, but to her and everyone else's surprise, he's alive. NASA and the government are defeated, a happy ending. Capricorn One is an okay movie. It's fine, it's functional, but not the greatest thing you'll ever see. I like the film, but it's definitely a product of its time. There are a few moments of wit and fun action, but overall it's a very slow movie.
Oh, the marvels of American science. Here we are, millions of miles from Earth. We can still send out for pizza.
General audiences today would not tolerate a movie of this pacing. Other than a few big moments like the big speech, the Mars landing, and the final plane chase, there isn't too much to be entertained by. The cinematography itself is very plain, mostly utilizing static wide shots on awful 1970s lenses and cheap high-speed film. The only unique element was the cinematography used for the final plane chase. A then revolutionary gimbal was engineered to keep the camera positioned the correct way up instead of being fixed directly to the helicopter. The cameraman was fixed to the side like a helicopter gunner, flying through the air, narrowly missing sharp cliff faces. This scene was technically impressive for the time, but pales in comparison to the stunts being performed today in movies like Mission Impossible. Though Capricorn One was made for a theatrical release, I feel that it's only really effective as a well-produced made-for-TV movie. The kind of film that comes on during the day, and you have it playing on the background while you prepare dinner, glancing up occasionally when a big important scene happens. I first came across this movie in an antique store, where I came across this. What is this? I asked myself at the time. It's obviously a movie of some kind, but why is it so big and plasticky? What is it? The answer is that it's actually a capacitance electronic disc, or CED. The reason CEDs are in these odd caddies is because they are very sensitive to dust. Fortunately, this film is available in modern formats, so you don't have to search the ends of the earth for a way to watch it. It's rare to see movie posters up close, and that's what really drew me to this disc and a pile of others. The poster has a good use of color, and for someone totally unfamiliar with the film or the concept, just like I was at the time, it does an effective job at establishing what the film is about. The contrast between cutting-edge technology, the spacesuit and lunar lander, but with ancient analog flying machines in the visor's reflection, it tells you what the film is about without actually telling you. A big government conspiracy where they fake the moon landing, or something like that. The Japanese release for this film had access to 2 posters, this one which is complete rubbish, and this one which is the most badass thing I've ever seen. I can't believe this poster is wasted on a movie like this. Could you imagine if this was used as an album cover? It's so much cooler than the movie actually is.
I'm dehydrated. Dehydrated. Fine.
Capricorn One was originally going to be released in February of 1978, but the big summer blockbuster, Superman, had production delays and wouldn't be finished until December of the same year. This naturally left Warner Brothers without a summer blockbuster, and thankfully enabled the film to receive all of Superman's marketing and theater slots.
The head of marketing at Warner Brothers called me up and said, "You just got lucky." I said, "What happened?" He said, "You are now the summer movie for Warner Brothers because Donner can't deliver Superman in time. You're getting all the Superman bookings, you're getting all the Superman advertising budget, you're getting everything." I said, "Well, I guess it's wonderful." He said, "It is wonderful." I said, "Well, what would have happened if Donner had delivered his picture on time?" He said, "Then you probably would have opened in 2 theaters in the South."
This coincidence allowed the film to become a decent financial success, though dwarfed in comparison to the other big summer blockbusters like Grease, Animal House, and Jaws 2. The success of the film granted Peter Hyams a moderately successful career in Hollywood, eventually directing films such as 1981's Outland and the sequel to Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, 2010, the year we made contact. Capricorn One is only really interesting in the context of the time period in which it was made, the actors, the production, and the history before and after its release. The acting in the movie is fine, I guess. It's not bad, just not very memorable. Hal Holbrook's performance is the best of them all, his delivery of all the big speeches are easily the most engaging, though the worst performance is definitely from none other than O.J. Simpson. Who is O.J. Simpson? Those of you under 30 are asking. Here's a quick history.
One of the most intriguing films now being put together in Hollywood is Capricorn One. James Brolin plays the first astronaut to set foot on Mars, but the picture's scene stealer will probably be O.J. Simpson.
O.J. was a standout running back and started his football career at the University of Southern California. While there, he earned his iconic nickname The Juice, shortened from Orange Juice, and also received the prestigious Heisman Trophy in 1968, which is awarded to the best college football player of the year. The following year, he joined the Buffalo Bills where he became an NFL superstar. O.J. achieved enormous financial success promoting products and television ads, notably for the car rental company Hertz. He tried to break into film as an actor, but mostly only received supporting roles in movies such as The Towering Inferno, The Naked Gun, and of course Capricorn One.
Police! Throw down your guns!
O.J. was also an NFL commentator for ABC's Monday Night Football. All these things combined made O.J. Simpson a household name nationwide, which is why what happened to him next made him famous worldwide. In 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson, O.J.'s ex-wife, and her friend Ronald Goldman were found stabbed to death outside Nicole's condo in Los Angeles.
I think I'm gonna throw up.
The blame was quickly placed on O.J., but O.J. was able to convince the police that he should turn himself in. However, O.J. Simpson did not turn himself in, and instead attempted to flee Los Angeles in his white Ford Bronco with his friend Al Cowlings, and the resulting slow-speed police chase was broadcasted to over 95 million people worldwide, a colossal view figure even by today's standards. O.J. Simpson eventually surrendered in his home and was arrested shortly after.
I snuck into the jail to see him, and there's this guy that was my buddy, and he looked emaciated. He was in an orange jumpsuit, and he was shackled to the desk in front of me, and he looked at me on the other side of plexiglass as close as he could be, and he said, "I swear to God I didn't do this." I believed him.
The following 1995 murder trial was dubbed the trial of the century, and riveted the nation. There was quite a bit of debate between the prosecutor and the defense, but the trial's most memorable moment came when Simpson tried on a pair of bloody gloves that appeared too small, leading to his defense attorney to declare, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." Later, in October of 1995, Simpson was acquitted of both murders, though a 1997 civil trial later found him liable and ordered to pay him $34 million in damages. The crimes that O.J. Simpson was accused of are not exceptional. Unfortunately, they happen quite often, but because he was a media celebrity, and because of how the Bronco chase was broadcasted, it became a major historical event. Initially, O.J.'s fans were cheering him on, "Go, O.J., go," just like in the Hertz commercials. But as time progressed, the weight of O.J.'s crime became too much for anyone to bear.
It's kind of impossible to look at this and see O.J. and not get a certain amount of chills.
O.J. Simpson's presence in the film Capricorn One is rather minor. He has very few lines, and of the few ones he does deliver, they're not really delivered with Shakespearean prose. Prose? Is it prose? Prose? I don't know.
These people, they're capable of anything. And we got our families out there.
Peter Hyams has stated in several interviews that O.J. was not the first choice for the role. However, Warner Brothers wanted him in the movie, and Peter Hyams had no choice but to accept. It's interesting to note that many people who worked with him on set often said positive things about him.
O.J.'s head was very big. It was so big we actually had to make a special helmet for him. The regular helmets didn't fit him.
Later in the production, during the desert chase scene, O.J. has his big part. O.J. wanted to improvise his lines, but Hyams said absolutely not.
I recall a moment with O.J. where we're in the Mojave Desert, and it's the day we're going to film O.J.'s death scene in the dried up creek. And Peter said to him as O.J. came over to say good morning, "Do you have your lines?" And O.J. said, "I'm just going to wing it." And Peter looked at him and said, "Juice, let me tell you something. At the moment, this is your close-up. You come back, if you don't come back in 15 minutes with your line burn, you're going to die as a little black dot in the middle of the desert." Juice looked at him and realized he wasn't kidding and said, "I'll be back." And he came back with his lines pulled. And this scene, I think, is pretty well done, considering Juice is not an actor.
Hyams was later interviewed in the ESPN documentary, O.J. Made in America.
He asked me if I would kind of be the chronicler of the whole thing. Would I write a book about the whole thing? And I backed away from that.
Capricorn One is very much a product of its time, and it reflects the feelings of Americans of the time too. They were fed up with all the conspiracies and corruptions and scandals and wars, and everything just seemed to be getting worse every day. Americans needed a victory, a win, even if it was a small one, even if it was a fictional one. A surprisingly common occurrence at screenings of this film in 1978 was the audience's reaction during the film's conclusion. Audiences around the country were cheering for the good guys beating the bad guys, about how the evil US government was finally defeated.
This movie, there's a point at the end where audiences cheered. They just did. It clearly couldn't have been because it was such a wonderful movie. It somehow struck a chord. And all over the place. Actually, a friend of mine was on an airplane. He came out of the men's room zipping up his fly, and the people on the airplane were cheering. And he looked, and they had their headsets on. And it was that they were watching the movie. I just think it was a time in America where we were so fed up with bad guys winning. And it was nice to see bad guys get it.
But today, no one really remembers this movie, and of the few people who have seen it, few rarely feel anything about it at all. The American government being portrayed as evil is a common trope today, so much so that the government being portrayed positively would be an anomaly and likely be perceived as propaganda. However, if you are a filmmaker and want to create an ambitious film, especially one that involves US resources like locations, vehicles, equipment, or soldiers, it can help to seek government support. A common contract for big films that utilize military resources is that the military will pay and provide for everything except the fuel, which will be paid for by the studio. This is an extremely lucrative opportunity for the studios because they naturally don't have to pay for much of anything at all. But for smaller movies, it can make or break the whole production. A film like Capricorn One, which is obviously very critical of the US government, would typically not receive any support at all from the government. But the film had a very small budget and they needed to take advantage of any opportunity that they could. So they decided to reach out to NASA to see if they could offer support, and they did! NASA helped to produce a conspiracy movie, which directly discredits them. What? NASA was involved in the production of the film, but the total extent of their involvement is uncertain. Contemporary sources, like this article from the Los Angeles Times, state that NASA was directly involved, but few detail specifics. And what's more is that modern sources are divided. NASA has never provided an official statement about the film, but Hyams was quoted saying years later, if they had any comments, they didn't make them public. The film's producer, Paul Lazarus, had previously worked as a producer for the 1976 film Future World, the sequel to Michael Crichton's Westworld. NASA was able to provide the Future World team with extensive use of the Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, which in turn granted them access to the Apollo Mission Control and Space Environment Simulator Laboratory. These places enabled the film to achieve a much higher authenticity with a relatively tiny production budget. Paul Lazarus was quoted saying about the production of Capricorn One, "This is a highly unlikely film to get NASA cooperation, because they're the bad guys in the movie. But I called my contact at the NASA Clear Lake facility, and he said he would have to see the script. I said to Peter, 'We're dead!' I sent the script and my contact said, 'Oh, it's a good story. We'll be happy to give you a prototype landing module. We didn't have to build any of that. It came up from Orange County, California.'" Lazarus continues. We had untold savings, not to mention authenticity, to get those capsules and other materials from NASA. Much after the fact, I said to someone at NASA, "How could you possibly have approved the script?" To which the NASA rep replied, "If I had gone to Washington, you would have been finished. But because we liked working with you on Future World, I took it upon myself to give cooperation."
I had a prior relation with NASA, and Peter said, "They're never going to let us make this." And I said, "Well, I think they will." And they did, and that was all fun.
Peter Hyams offers several conflicting recollections of NASA's involvement. One Hyams quote says about NASA, "I believe their feeling was that if they were obstructive, it would only add fuel to the rumor that the moon landings were fake, and it would make it appear more credible." A journalist named Paul Rowlands reached out to Hyams for an interview, and Hyams said something a little bit different. "The film presents NASA as the bad guys. How did you get them to help you with the film?" "We did the film in spite of them. I wouldn't say they were helpful in making the film. I had the actual books, these huge, multi-hundred loose-leaf books. I had saved them from my time as a reporter. NASA was helpful in giving us the plans to build what was the most accurate reproduction of the lunar ascent and descent stages in the world. It was an amazing thing. The photographs have come in, so we knew exactly what the Martian surface looked like. The NASA guys came to see it because it was quite a sight. It was correct to 1/4 of an inch. It was as close to the photographs as anything could ever be." Did NASA read the script at all? I don't think I sent it to them. A couple of guys from NASA did visit the set. They looked at what we had built and they were just swooning. We were going to donate the set to the Smithsonian, but we couldn't get it out the door. Hyams stated something similar in the director's commentary.
And the first day we shot on the set, I came very early, and there was Mars with the exact colors from the photographs, with the exact rock formations, with the exact proper color of the cyc, with the largest and most accurate model of the lunar ascent and descent stages ever built anywhere in the world. And I stood there all alone, and I remember feeling, my God, I've done something pretty cool. And then I looked really closely at the ground, and I saw paw prints. I saw cat prints on the Martian surface. And I started to walk around to follow the cat prints, and I followed the cat prints over to pretty close to where Hal is standing now by the left leg of the descent stage. And there was a big cat turd. My very first experience with my most important and biggest set. A cat had beaten me to it and left his calling card.
Lazarus says that NASA provided the production with a prototype landing module, but Hyams has said in multiple interviews that the landing module is an accurate and faithful reproduction. However, neither of them mentioned the command module, service module, or any of the other pieces of NASA equipment used in the film. It's possible that Lazarus, or maybe the interviewer, confused one of the other modules for the lunar lander module and swapped the names by mistake, as it's easy to confuse them. There also appears to be some confusion with the Smithsonian aspect. Hyams said in one interview that he considered donating the reproduction to the museum, but in the director's commentary, he said that the Smithsonian asked him for it.
We in fact built the most accurate model in history of the lunar ascent and descent modules. The Smithsonian wanted it, except nobody could get it out the door.
He maintains that the module couldn't fit through the door, but for big weird things like this, it's usually the buyer's responsibility to deal with the logistics, not the seller. I couldn't find any evidence of the Smithsonian's involvement, but it's worth noting that the unused LM-2 lunar lander on display at the Smithsonian was already on display from 1971 forward, and it's unlikely that they needed another one. Given the available evidence, which is rather limited, the most likely conclusion is that NASA was involved and did provide professional consulting to help improve the accuracy of the film. However, the equipment that they provided is a contentious subject. Perhaps Hyams never considered the equipment NASA offered to be significant enough to mention, or the prototypes they offered were integrated into the reproductions and needed to be returned when the production was finished filming, and thus the remaining reproductions being too incomplete to be offered or accepted by the Smithsonian. Or perhaps the lunar lander is a reproduction, but the command and service module were actual NASA prototypes. No matter the case, NASA's involvement with a film that labels them as nefarious and evil is certainly unusual.
How much did those NASA lying tists pay you to say that, eh?
Conspiracy theorists love this movie, except for one. While the aforementioned Bill Kaysing book, We Never Went to the Moon, was the first to come to market with the moon landing conspiracy, it's more reasonable to say that Capricorn One is responsible for popularizing the theory within the general public. Bill Kaysing was quite upset when the film released, because apparently he was working on his own film. Around 1977, Kaysing was supposedly working on a screenplay for a film based on his book. His publisher hired a well-known screenwriter, Ken Rotkopf, for the task, and had plans to approach Sir Lew Grade, the same man who was already working with Hyams to produce Capricorn One. Kaysing alleged that during this time he was being watched by unknown entities and ectoplasmatic forces. Casing was about to pitch his screenplay to Sir Lou Grade, but as it would turn out, Capricorn One was about to release in theaters worldwide. Casing was bewildered. Casing tried to argue that his work was plagiarized, but the court case did not go very far. Easy to obtain evidence proves that Hyams finished writing the script in 1974. A Life magazine article written by Norman Mailer from 1969 details a similar theory, and a year prior to that, a BBC Two theater production created a fake moon landing in one of their studios. Further, Casing had admitted to being influenced by the writer Lloyd Malin, who wrote several books in the 50s and 60s about the Soviets faking their accomplishments in space. An article by Phil Kirby from The Culture Vulture suggests that Casing's only original contribution to the moon landing conspiracy is that he phrased his book in a "I'm just asking questions" kind of way. Amusingly, Ken Rotakop, the screenwriter for Casing's film, didn't actually create a screenplay about the book at all. He had actually desired to make the movie about Casing's life and how he was a colorful character. He also added that the script was sent to Universal and not Sir Lou Grade. However, because Casing was first to market with the idea, he has received the dubious prestige of being credited for the conspiracy. Clips from this movie occasionally make the rounds on social media, a most recent example allegedly being released from the infamous WikiLeaks in 2020. The video claims to be proof that the moon landing was faked and filmed in the Nevada desert. The video was circulated on Facebook and Twitter and received a modest notoriety. The video shows a montage of some kind of production faking a moon landing, and occasionally audio clips can be heard throughout the video. Unfortunately for the moon landing deniers out there, this evidence is just footage from Capricorn One and stock moon landing footage. The telltale signs are the giant arc lights and OJ's enormous head. The dialogue and synchronization sound tones can be specifically found in a behind-the-scenes video offered as a bonus feature on the Blu-ray.
Yes, that's fine, yeah.
Even more of a disappointment to the bleach drinkers out there, this isn't even a genuine WikiLeaks leak. It was made by a fraud with a fake WikiLeaks watermark. This video was debunked not long after by Reuters, with exact timestamps and evidence. Conspiracy theorists try to use this film as evidence in their theories to prove that the government really did fake the moon landing. However, they seem to not recognize that the hoax in the movie didn't work. NASA's ruse was revealed to the world because it just wasn't possible to account for everything, like the journalist discovering the astronaut's clever lie, or the technician finding the broadcast discrepancy. The easiest way to prove that the moon landing happened is to point out that there were too many people involved. Eventually, at some point, someone would have spilled the beans. To elaborate on this further, I'll let an expert take it from here.
Joined once again by former NASA astronaut and author of this new book, Magnificent Desolation, Dr. Buzz Aldrin. Welcome back, Buzz.
Thanks, Robert. Always great to be here.
Good to have you here. Now, up next we have a film that I imagine doesn't rank among one of Dr. Aldrin's favorite movies because it's all about a government conspiracy to fake a manned mission to Mars. It's Capricorn One from director Peter Hyams and starring Hal Holbrook, James Brolin, and Elliot Gould. Just how do you feel about this movie, sir?
Well, you know, it could have been made about the future, but it had all the equipment showing the launch that was Apollo equipment, the Saturn V lifting off, and the spacecraft were Apollo command modules. So I'm sure that a lot of people came away after seeing this movie and saying, they're not talking about Mars. This is really because they faked the mission to the moon with Apollo and it never happened.
Yes, that's Buzz Aldrin, the second man to step on the moon.
Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon.
Second comes right after first.
He's actually a pretty chill guy, and he doesn't mind being second, as explained by the writers of The Simpsons.
Buzz had a different line there. We had written a different line for Buzz here. You know, saying Buzz Aldrin, second man on the moon, and then he was going to say first to take a soil sample, which I thought was a really nice joke. But Buzz said, you know, I really don't have a problem with being the second man on the moon, and he really doesn't. Yeah. I have to say, of all the celebrities I've met, and I've just met like everybody, I've been incredibly lucky in my life. Buzz Aldrin is one of the most impressive people I have ever met in my life.
That clip was from a cable broadcast network called Turner Classic Movies. At the time, Aldrin just released his book, Magnificent Desolation, and appeared on the show to promote it.
The story could have been told maybe about some good reason why, after making all the plans to go to Mars, and you find there's a flaw in the plan, that you're going to start lying to everybody and think you're going to get away with it and carry it out as if nothing went wrong, and you're gonna fake it all
And nobody's
along.
ever going to talk?
I mean, the impossibility of something like that ever happening.
So anyway, if
Did he just say "so anyway" to Buzz Aldrin? Dude, he was only talking for like a minute and a half. Chill. Aldrin makes note that the film used Apollo equipment and not futuristic equipment, and this implies that the movie is really about the moon landing and how it was faked. Peter Hyams is not a conspiracy theorist and has stated that the moon landing is an outstanding accomplishment. He said in 1994 that the film was made for entertainment, for fun, and that there was no truth or agenda. I was aware that there were people who believed that we never walked on the moon, but I never read their books or consulted with them. And frankly, I think they are being totally ludicrous. The reason Hyams used Apollo equipment was for two main reasons. The first is because they already had access to them, either because NASA provided them directly or NASA helped to build reproductions. And second, audiences at the time perceived Apollo equipment as real or genuine, so any fictional equipment made specifically for this movie would encourage people to perceive it as a fantasy. But from a technical standpoint, Apollo equipment couldn't be used on Mars because Mars has its own atmosphere, and a lander would need to be shaped aerodynamically. If a lunar lander were to be used on Mars, it would break apart in the attempt. Another discrepancy is the time it takes for the rocket to reach Mars and back. It only takes a few months in the film, but in reality it would likely take about 3 years. If you actually listen to any of these people talk, you quickly realize that they don't really have anything to say.
I might say now that Paul Jacobs wrote the introduction to this book in 1967. Paul Jacobs is now down to 110 pounds, I read. He's dying of cancer. I don't know whether it's a Jack Ruby cancer or Martha Mitchell cancer, but I think it's terribly serious that we locate what doctors were seeing these particular people, or what kind of treatment, and how many people are being killed or have cancer. Mr. Barron was killed at a railroad crossing, and maybe it's coincidental. Maybe I'm becoming too paranoid.
The only actual research that they ever do is to find out the big names involved, the date that they happened, and where they happened. They seem to think that random information is evidence, and it's somehow all connected. The Cuban Missile Crisis and the first ever Taco Bell opened in 1962? Coincidence? Well, yeah, it is. There's no grand scheme with NASA's involvement in Capricorn One, regardless of their actual cooperation level. Paul Lazarus was just some friends with some guys at NASA, and they decided to help him out. So in the future, if you ever come across moon landing conspiracy misinformation, you might catch some clips of Capricorn One in there. I couldn't come up with a good ending or conclusion to this video, so that's about it. If you're into old movies, it's worth a watch, but if you're currently doom scrolling TikTok while this video is playing in the background, it's probably not for you. If you want, you can like the video and subscribe. Up to you. That's all. Thanks for watching. I am the internet. Subscribe and like for more content.